Welcome back, everybody. It is the Awesemo.com NHL DFS strategy show. We have just a two-gamer to talk about, but wanted to get on and talk some Showdown, some short slate strategy. Michael Clifford, Slim Cliffy, kind enough to join me once again. What's up, man?
Not a whole lot. Just we were talking before the show about last night's slate. Just kind of fuming over some certain selections because I think both of us had quite a bit of McKinnon and Kadri, and this still didn't work out for either of us. So just one of those nights. You just got to kind of put it in your rearview mirror. Know that you were in the right spots. You just got unlucky with maybe some defenseman or your one-off winger or goaltender or something like that.
Yeah, expensive defensemen didn't do a whole lot yesterday for the most part. So you're seeing a lot of. I've actually got the lineup study up from last night, FC Pro's lineup study. I think I mentioned this a couple times before, but you guys can get this through us if you sign up for a Fantasy Cruncher package. You get Classic, and then you can sign up for FC Pro to get tools like lineup study. So looking at the top five lineups, no player that finished in the top five in an MME tournament. I mean, this had almost 5,000 entries. No player in the top five had more than three lineups. So it was just it. If you played your cash lineup, and it had to be a good cash lineup. But if you played your cash lineup in tournaments or played a handful of them, like this guy who won Team Teal '08, took it down. He actually did have a couple stacks in here, but it was McKinnon and Landeskog. Okay, so the two-man Colorado won. Bergeron, Pasternak could have easily been Brad Marchand in there with a 0. Instead, he got 20.5 from Pasternak. Brett Kulak and Hayden Fleury as his defenseman, two of the higher scoring defensemen on the slate. We had them both projected for under 1% ownership. They both came in under 2%. 17.6 from 3K Kulak, 19.9 from $2,500 Hayden Fleury, who he played against Halak, his goalie, and then Bozak and a Donskoy one-off, uncorrelated to the rest of his Colorado team. So, yeah, that was the winning lineup. I think he cleared it by about 10 points.
Yeah.
I'm assuming I usually do. Might be a mistake there, but 192.3 next best score was essentially 10 points, 182.4. Tough to do on a short slate. If you look at the second place lineup, it was definitely more of a stack, but a little bit unconventional. Pedersen, Miller, McKinnon, Landeskog, and not Rantanen. It was Kadri, Donskoy as well. So 4 forwards, no defensemen for Colorado, and then Kulak, Justin Braun, and Markstrom in net. So that was more of a tournament lineup, but a lot of these at the top were cash lineups. Wasn't a great night for the 150 maxers, including myself. I did not finish in the top 5 or 6th. So I guess, I'd rather finish in the top 5 than 35th was my best lineup. But I had a ton of Colorado. It just goes to show that when you're right on chalk, sometimes it doesn't even matter. And so that's why you got to remember that when you're playing chalk, you need to get somewhat different. And a lot of the cash plays hit last night. And McKinnon's line mates, for as well as I thought they played, they didn't really score that many points, Landeskog and Rantanen. It was McKinnon doing a lot of the work. He had 40-plus DK points. And then those guys were like mid-teens, which is fine on a bigger slate, but on a smaller slate with concentrated ownership, didn't really work out. So I've got my exposures up here. I had 43% McKinnon. He was my highest owned player by a mile. Gets 42 points. I end up losing about a third of my entries in this tournament, which is crazy. You got to get close to hitting nuts in these tournaments, but kind of a frustrating night. But tonight, two gamers. Just general thoughts on like two gamers and showdowns, because we're gonna have a bunch of these coming up. I know you got some thoughts just on lineup construction, things to avoid, things you're gonna want to do on every slate. So what are your just general thoughts on short slates and especially on showdowns?
Yeah. So for Showdown, I think one thing that's kind of tough for people that are just getting into Showdown to really wrap their heads around is stacking against your goalie, right? You know, oddly enough, the person that won the 10K last night did that with Hayden Fleury up against Halak, and that worked out. But that's something that you're going to have to get comfortable with doing, is not just having one player against your goalie because you have to, because you have to have at least one player from the opposing team in your Showdown lineups, but having two, maybe even three. I think three might be pushing it, but definitely two guys. Going a 4-2 where in the four stack you have the goalie, and in the two you're stacking against them. If I'm not mistaken, the guy that won the late Showdown last night in the Vancouver St. Louis game had two Blues with Markstrom in the lineup.
Yep, I got the lineup pulled up right now. It was Shen and O'Reilly, and then Markstrom, and then how about this? Tyler Mott, 23.5 DK points with his JT Miller, Bo Horvat. Kind of uncorrelated all around, but nailed the fourth liner that scored a couple times.
Yeah, and the second thing that I kind of want to talk about is the correlation, right? Not I think people would be kind of surprised at how few goals are perfectly correlated. I was just looking at some of the top lines from this past season, this past regular season. So I looked at the 9 lines that had played at least 500 minutes together. Brad Marchand, out of his 28 goals, had one assisted by both Bergeron and Pasternak. Elias Lindholm and Johnny Gaudreau scored 47 goals between them this year, and they had 2 perfectly correlated goals between them. There are it seems dependent on the team and the types of players. Like, it seems like with the goal scoring centers, somebody like Bergeron who can score 30 or 35 goals or maybe even push 40. There's more correlation between the wingers. But this is kind of anecdotal. This is just me looking through one season stats. But it just seems like the teams with the goal scoring centers, the guy that can put up 30 or 35 goals, somebody like Patrice Bergeron, there's more correlation between the wingers than there is the center, as opposed to if you were to look at somewhere like Winnipeg. I think Shifley had like 28 goals or something like that this year, but there's a lot more correlation in between them. And of course, part of that with Bergeron has to do with, the injury. He missed like 10 or 12 games or something like that this year. So that, that factors into everything. But if I were to say anything, it's that you don't need 3-man stacks. You don't need to, if you're playing the St. Louis Vancouver slate tomorrow, let's say, you don't need to put Shen or Schwartz and O'Reilly and Perron all in the same stack. The chances that they actually get a perfectly correlated goal are relatively low. Even at the upper end, you're probably looking at maybe a third of their goals. So I think you have to get comfortable with leaving one guy off a stack, figuring out which guy that might want to be, or which combination. You can have 6 lineups with all 3 Boston 1 guys, let's say, and then 6 lineups with just Marchand and Pasternak, and so on and so forth. So you have to get comfortable with leaving guys off stacks, looking for more creative ways to stack. Uncorrelated lines, like you were just talking about. We saw that with Colorado last night. Some people had, let's say, Donskoy in with their Colorado 1. Those are the types of moves you're going to have to get more comfortable doing in Showdown if you want to find some success. Probably the last thing I would say is you don't have to spend up. You don't have to spend every dollar in your lineup. Now, obviously, you generally want to get the more expensive guys in because they're generally the better players and generally the better plays. But we talk about line matching quite a bit here on this show, and line matching makes a difference. Like if you're to look at Dallas-Calgary tonight, for example, it might be a good night for Dallas too. We're going to get that into a little bit more depth later, but just for example, it might be a good night for Dallas too, and they're very cheap. So let's say you like the Islanders second line tonight, and you like the Dallas second line. You could end up with like 9,000 left on the table, and I could say that's fine. There's a reasonable chance that those are the 2 high-scoring lines of the night, or at least some of the players in those lines are among the high-scoring players of the night. So those are kind of my 3 tips. Is 1, there's a lot less correlation than you think, so you don't need those full 3-man stacks as often as you might think you do. Obviously, it's nice when you get those perfectly correlated goals. There's almost no better feeling.
Oh yeah.
In the NHL DFS. It's just they're infrequent. So just worry about that. Two, you have to get used to stacking against your goalie. You have to do it with at least one person. Sometimes it may be even optimal to do it with two, depending on the shot volume that the goalie might face. And three is just to actually forget what was the last point that I was talking about.
You were talking about. I mean, you kind of merged the first two together, so I think you hit on everything that you already
Yeah,
talked about.
oh,
There's
it was uncorrelated. Yeah,
uncorrelated stacking. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. So just get used to the uncorrelated stacks
Yep.
and sneaking in a third line winger with your first line center, first line right wing, or something like that.
Yep. Or like, we see a lot of people yesterday: McKinnon, Landeskog, or Rantanen, and then Kadri instead of the third guy might be a way to differentiate. Although on Colorado Showdown slates,
Yeah, Kadri would be pretty highly owned.
yeah, because I think he's going to be maybe cheaper than both Landeskog and Rantanen. So maybe that's not a great example, but you get the idea. By the way, I really hope we get Colorado and Vegas at some point here.
I mean,
it seems like it's going to happen.
Yeah, it's got to be destiny, right?
But man, that would be such a fun series. So I'm just crossing my fingers hoping that happens.
Like, it's just been such a bad year. This is all I want. Please give me this series.
They were talking about that on the Colorado broadcast. I can't remember where I heard it. Maybe it was the Colorado broadcast yesterday. But yeah, that'd be a lot of fun for Showdown and just for like watching purposes. Like if you like hockey, if you like scoring, and just a ton of talent spread out throughout the series. So hoping we get that, and then hopefully we can make some money on top of that. So kind of what you were talking about tonight. So if you're using Fantasy Cruncher, and I suggest you do, if you're comfortable using it or have a subscription to it through us or just through Fantasy Cruncher, I would suggest making some groups. So right now I've got Alex Ovechkin captain, and we don't know the lines necessarily for the Capitals, but let's assume he's going to play with Kuznetsov and Wilson. So I've got Ovechkin as the captain in this lineup. I would want to use at least one player of Kuznetsov or Wilson. Not saying you have to do this. You could get there with an OV one-off. He's kind of a special example, but in general, you probably want, if your captain is, so your captain's on a line, obviously, you're going to want probably one or two of his line mates, and you could do two if you want to do the full stack, but I would suggest at least one there, and that's kind of how I would think about building Showdown lineups if I'm mass multi-entering, especially, which is what I plan to do. You could kind of do this stuff for 2-game slates, but it's easier to use the team stacks function, I think, for this, for the 2-gamers and anything beyond that. Also, if you're using Fantasy Cruncher, and I think all optimizers have this as a default, offensive players versus goalie. If you're wondering why you're crunching and you're not getting any goalie exposure, that's why. You have to select at least max 1 player. You can select max 3 players. I think some Ottawa Senators slates I did like up to 3 at some point this season when it was Craig Anderson or Anders Nilsson, and he thought they're going to get wrecked, but he was going to see 40 shots or something like that. So kind of each slate is going to be different on its own. It's a new puzzle, but I think you can do some pretty good stuff in Fantasy Cruncher to make sure all your lineups have good correlation, and make sure you're not over correlating as well. You can make groups to have, say, only like 2 or 3 guys from a team, or make sure you don't have guys from 3 different lines on your roster, because if you just press optimize, you're going to get some of that going on. You're going to get a lot of 4th liners, stars and scrubs, but I like to stick to the top 2 lines especially and mix in some 3rd liners as well as a general rule for building Showdown lineups. So we'll be talking more about that kind of as we go along, but just wanted to get Cliffy's thoughts, and I agree with basically everything he said there. So this is all we got for now. 2 gamers, Showdowns. Hopefully we get some really good contests along the way. We're going to go through each game in just a minute, but wanted to give a shout out to Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports for sponsoring the NHL Strategy Show. They've got some big contests, bigger ones than we've seen over the last couple of days for NHL. $200 to first, $700 guaranteed in their $12 today. Obviously going to lock at 8 Eastern. It's pretty easy to build lineups on Yahoo. Sometimes there's some overlay. And you do have CSV edit, which isn't super important for NHL, but it is for MLB if you're playing NBA, and then especially NFL coming up in 3 weeks from today, which is wild, assuming they can get that season in. So cross my fingers that kicks off and goes somewhat smoothly, but we'll still have NBA, MLB, and NHL and PGA over on Yahoo, which just locked a few hours ago. So get over there, use promo code Awesemo to get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points, those YSRPs. All right. One more thing. NHL rankings are free for today. These are derived from the projections. Gives you a tiered breakdown of the best plays, kind of some plays you maybe want to get off of, some plays that are going to be spend up to be contrarian options, and so on. Let's talk about these two games. Islanders and Capitals, 2.6 implied total for the Islanders, 2.6 as well for the Capitals. Varlamov and Holtby are your expected goalies. The big question mark here, it seems like we've had question marks with every single game this entire week, and that's no different tonight. We got two big ones. This one is whether or not Nick Backstrom's going to play, and if he does play, which line is he going to play with? Luckily, this is the first game of the slate, so we will at least have an idea of whether or not he's in. The lines, we've seen a bunch of times recently, teams put lines out in pregame and then not do that. Talking to you, Philadelphia Flyers, serves you right for losing yesterday. But what are your thoughts on this first game here?
Quite a bit will depend on whether or not Backstrom's back, because with Backstrom in the lineup, they tend to use him against the other team's top line. With Backstrom out of the lineup, they tend to use Kuznetsov against the other team's top line, and that Kuznetsov, Ovechkin, Wilson line is bad defensively. So if Backstrom's not skating tonight, we can probably expect that Kuznetsov line to go up against Barzal, Everly, and Lee, and that's a matchup that greatly favors the Islanders. I haven't checked our ownerships today. They'll be popular. It's a 2-game slate regardless. So
Caps one really more popular than Islanders one, like by a pretty good margin. And I think we're dead on there. I think everybody's on the Island or the Caps tonight. They're on OB, they're on Wilson and Kuznetsov.
Yeah, I can see that. I was just thinking of, like, we've seen Islanders 2 push or surpass ownership of Islanders 1 at times this playoff season. I don't see that tonight. I mean, maybe the second line still gets some ownership because that top line is creeping up in price. I mean, they are up almost 19K, but I can't get away from that. If I was gonna be stacking out of this game, that Islanders top line to me is just such a good matchup at 5-on-5 that they should be able to carry the play. I mean, I was looking at some of the goaltending stats this morning from the first round, and Braden Holtby is facing the most high danger chances against, like, by far of any goalie in the first round. Like, this Islanders team is just having its way with the Caps. In fact, Holtby, believe it or not, is probably the only reason this series isn't over. And it's kind of funny to say because he struggled a lot this year. He struggled the year before up until the Cup run, basically, too. But he's been pretty good for them in this postseason. So I don't like playing Braden Holtby a whole lot, again, because he hasn't been that good for the last 2 years. But he's held up well this postseason. So I think it's one of those cases where lineups without Islanders 1, you can make a good case for having Holtby in there. Looking at the defenseman, like, I'm not going to be on the Islanders second line, I don't think. They're going into the tough matchup. They're going into the toughest matchup possible for Washington, and that's Oshie, Eller, and Brana. Even if Eller moves down to the third line and it's Backstrom, that doesn't make things any easier. So I'm out on the Islanders second line. I mean, out. When I say out, I mean it's not that I would never ever roster them or something like that. It's just I wouldn't give them priority on this particular slate. So, not a whole lot of the Islanders' second line. Um, if you want to drop down to the Washington second line, I think that's fine. They looked all right last game, but Oshie quite hasn't looked like himself. It looks like he's trying to not play a skill game, more play like a grinding game, and I never really understand that from him. He does that sometimes. It's just kind of weird, but I like the way they played. It's just that second power play unit doesn't get a lot of time, and we still don't know Backstrom's availability. So I like that Washington second line still. I think they're good. I just think it's not a great matchup, and we'll have to see what happens with Backstrom. One thing of note among the defensemen is Brendan Dillon. He's been moved up to the top pair, and he's been getting a lot of ice time. He was second in ice time on the team last game. That's in total ice time, not in just 5-on-5 or even strength or something. Like, he is getting as much ice time as he can handle, and I think his price has climbed, but it's still under $3K. So he's probably one of my favorite punt defensemen on the slate. Looking at the Islanders side, like, Devin Taves is starting to get really, really expensive. 4,800 for a guy that doesn't shoot and doesn't really block shots. I mean, he doesn't play a ton of minutes. Like, he's one of the, like, they play their top four pretty regularly, so he's one of those in that mix, but he's not on the top pair. But like, you're really relying on him putting up 2 assists, two block shots in a shot. Like, you're relying on multiple points from him to really reach value in a GPP. So I think, if you want to use Devin Taves as part of Islander stacks, I guess that's fine. I'd leave him off a few of them, and I probably wouldn't use him as a one-off either. Honestly, I kind of like the way Adam Pelech has been playing. He's been getting more expensive too, though, is the problem. Like, I think $4,000 is a little bit too expensive for Pelech, but it's not a super expensive slate. Like, if you're not playing Ovechkin, you can pretty much play just about anything you want. So if you don't have Ovechkin, then I'd be fine playing Pelech. If you are playing Ovechkin and that cap's top EP, then you probably have to worry about your money a little bit more.
Yeah, I think as far as exposures go on this game, I kind of know already in general where I'm going to be at. Now I'm going to remake my lineups if Backstrom ends up being in, but right now I have him out. It won't change too much if he's out, assuming he slots in with in Eller's spot, and then they keep the top line the same, and then Eller just slides in with Hagelin and Kovalchuk. I actually think that would be a pretty good line. And I don't know that you have to full stack it, but Washington 3, like Eller, Hagelin, or something like that is a really cheap 2-man. Even with Washington stack, if you wanted to jam in Ovi. So I'll be keeping my eyes out for that, because right now I have basically no players from Washington 3, but Eller would change a lot for me there. I'm right there with you on Islanders 1. I hope they go up against Kuznetsov, Ovi, and Wilson. I thought I would see some better numbers. They looked a little bit better to me in the last game, eye test wise, and then I looked at their numbers and they were, again, not impressive. They just don't generate that many chances. I guess the thing I get confused about is their chances are from Ovi, and so they always look scary when they do get their few chances. So I don't know, hard to reconcile that, but.
Even Kuznetsov, though, like, he's looked better the last couple games. Like,
he looked way more aggressive offense.
Yeah, he had the goal, and yeah, it kind of seems like he's taking it more upon himself to generate offense rather than just gaining the zone and looking for Ovi. Yeah. So, I mean, I think there's something to your eye test theory, but does that carry over to another game, or do they just come out flat and get pummeled again? I mean, that's kind of the big question. We know that, like, I guess it's at least nice to see that Kuznetsov is showing that gear in the playoffs. Like, he's showing that if he wants to play to his max, he can go out and score a goal.
Yeah.
That's not something he was really doing for them through the first 5 or 6 games of this entire postseason.
Yeah, and I think you can one-off Ovi just for the chance of a power play goal. Even if like the line doesn't do great on a 2-game slate, just having him in there as your one-off is smart. Even at 40%, there's not really a guy that compares to him on this slate. There's no Kucherov. There's no like great goal scorer elsewhere on this slate. So,
Dylan Dubé would like a word with you.
well, yeah. I mean, we'll get to Calgary 3 in a minute here. They had another really really good game. We're showing similar ownership between Islanders 1 and Islanders 2 as I get a text alert on my phone about something about Backstrom. I can't see the tweet. Let me check this out quick. Backstrom participated in the morning skate. Game time decision. So that doesn't really help us.
Yeah, it's the same thing as last game.
Yeah, I thought he was going to play last game. I have no clue. I'm kind of done guessing on these guys. Another reason to play Showdown, because if a guy is a surprise in, even if you weren't planning on playing the slate, just playing him in your lineups, we saw it a bunch of times last year in the playoffs. They're just super low owned. And even Pasternak, you had a couple hours yesterday, and yeah, it was a bigger slate. There were more options, but in the $11 yesterday, Pasternak was 15.5% owned, I think. Marchand and Bergeron are over 25.
He was half the ownership of Bergeron, and he was the first game, and we had all day to prepare for it, and we had like 20 minutes before the slate saying he's in the lineup.
Yep. There was no excuses, and you still saw what happened. Normally, he's the highest owned guy on that line by a long shot, and he wasn't. So if you're reacting to late news, even if it's not paying off, you're helping yourself in the long run. It will pay off at some point. You will get rewarded for that kind of behavior. Like what you said about Dylan, I bumped him up a little bit at 2,800. Probably going to get well over 20 minutes again here, assuming he plays with Carlson. And then Carlson right now is my highest owned defenseman. Looking at where I have Ovi, I'm below the field on him, but he is my highest owned Capitals forward. So I do like that. I'm just not as high on the Capitals. Like, they won one game. They had a nice second period and ended up winning. But I still think they're not the better team. And so I'll take the Islanders at lower ownership, specifically that top line. Not doing a whole lot with these Islanders defensemen. They're mostly the same to me besides Pulak, but he's 5,800 now. His price is going up despite his play not really going up, if you want to put it like that. So Dylan Carlson.
Devin Taves only $600 cheaper than Klingberg. It's just
nuts.
Insanity.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you wanted to go Pajot one-off or Pajot Brassard, I suppose you could do that. I'm just not getting to much outside of Islanders 1, getting to some Ovi, like I said. Islanders 2, not a priority for me either. And then keep an eye on this third line, two mans with Eller and one of the wingers as a low-owned combo in my 3-2-1s. Anything else left in this game?
No, that's about it. I don't think I'm not super high on either goaltender. Like I said, I wouldn't mind rostering Holtby. He's done well for them this year or these playoffs, but he's facing a lot of high danger chances. Those are high percentage chances, which is bad for your save percentage, which is in turn bad for your DraftKings total. So I don't mind Holtby, but I think the quality's a little bit too much.
Right. So actually, Varlamov is my highest owned goalie right now. I mean, he's not projected that high, but it's decent ownership compared to the field. And I hate playing goalies against the Capitals, but I just don't think there's very good options. Any of these four guys, like, there's no obvious goalie option, I don't think. So whoever, I'm just gonna flatten out my goalie exposure and hope I get the right one in the right lineups. Honestly, whoever fits, and I'm allowing players against my goalie anyways. So I'm already negatively correlated there. Stars and Flames, other game on the night. This will be a 10:30 Eastern lock in Edmonton, since it is the Western Conference. 2.7 implied total for the Stars, 2.4 for the Flames. Khudobin and Talbot probably going to be your goalies. Closeout game for the Stars. Question mark here is whether or not Matthew Tkachuk can play. He was a game time decision Last time out, he was not on the ice for warmups, didn't play, and Calgary got beat again. Have you heard anything about Kachuk? Because I surely haven't.
No. I wish I had. I wish I had better news for you, but no, we don't. I haven't seen anything or heard anything on Kachuk. I mean, this unfit to play and unfit to practice and all that. We're seeing the fruits of that labor bear out so far this postseason, and it's incredibly frustrating. They did change up the lines last game with Gaudreau, Monahan, and Tobias Reeder on the top line. Elias Lindholm dropped down to the second line. Last time this game was on a slate, we talked about how that Calgary second line was getting throttled with Reeder on that, or without Kachuk on that line in general. Now, moving Lindholm down there doesn't really change anything. Lindholm's fine, but he's not great defensively. He's certainly no Matthew Tkachuk. Like, I don't see this as like a massive, like, it's an upgrade over Reeder for sure, but it's not like a game changer. What I think this does is greatly weakens the top line, Gaudreau and Monahan. Like, Reeder, there's a reason he bounced around the NHL. Couldn't last in Arizona, couldn't last, I think, in Los Angeles. Like, we're talking, he wasn't good enough to play on the third and fourth lines of some of the worst teams in the league. Now he's on the top line in the playoffs. Like, he's maybe an NHLer, but he's not a first line winger, and he's like, his offensive metrics are god awful. So that Calgary top line was already a concern defensively. With Reeder there, it becomes even more of a concern. They had the last change tonight. Last change generally means that they go up against the second line. Second line for Dallas actually isn't that bad. Pavelski and Gurianov and Janmark. Janmark is one guy we should make note of. I think he blocked a shot and he missed a few shifts yesterday, but he finished the game, so he should be all right. It's just something to note for when lineups come out 10 hours from now or whenever it is. But that Dallas second line, Pavelski, Janmark, Gurianov, I do like their matchup going up against that Calgary top line a lot here today. That top line for Calgary just looked like bad all playoffs. Like, they haven't looked good at any point. Tobias Reeder's not going to help them. He's only going to make that line worse. So I'm definitely, like, Joe Pavelski would be one of my favorite one-offs on the entire slate. I think that it's kind of obvious because he's top power play and he's on that line by himself, but I like Pavelski a lot as a one-off, Gurianov as a one-off. I mean, just using Pavelski, Gurianov as a stack and throwing them with, Heiskanen or something like that, or even, dropping down to a cheaper defenseman like Lindell or Alexiak, mixing that in with your Washington power play or your Islanders one is, might be a way to go if you're going one lineup here tonight just to try to get a bit different. I don't think Dallas 2 as a full stack is going to have that much ownership on them, or even as a 2 out of 3. So I imagine there's going to be a lot of Dallas 1 ownership again here tonight. I don't particularly mind using them. It's still a decent matchup. I do think that line got better with Lindholm there. So, this isn't a slam dunk like it was last game, I don't think. My favorite line in this entire game is probably that Dallas second line, and my favorite player in that whole game is Joe Pavelski. I think that they're going to I think they're going to have the run of the play anyway, going up against that Calgary top line. And again, back on the Rasmus Anderson train, he was second in minutes only to Giordano in their last game. He played basically the entire final 3 minutes, other than the last, I think it was like 25 seconds. They had a power play, so then they put Gustafsson out. But like, Anderson played like 2:30 out of the final 3 minutes or something like that. So they're obviously leaning on him heavily, even above some of the, guys like TJ Brody, who's a veteran of 10 years. Like, Anderson is getting the run of the play over him. So along with Dylan at 2,800 in the Washington game, Anderson's one of my favorite cheap defensemen to use today.
Nice. I like it. I've come on to Anderson a little bit more since you've been talking about
him. And he's looked good too. It's, it's not, they're not doing this just because they have to, because they have no one else. It's because he's earned it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he was a guy that I usually just X'd out because he didn't do much of anything over the last couple seasons. But he is doing a little bit more. He's obviously trusted in the coaching staff's eyes. So that is good to see some little nuances you can pick up there and get on guys early before everyone else. This game, I wish this one was the first on the slate because Kachuk really, really matters. Um, Again, even if he's 80% of himself, he makes it so they have a sound top six. They don't have to put Toby Reeder in there. They're not breaking up this third line, I don't think. So if Kachuk goes in, it's pretty much a slam dunk that Reeder's dropping down to the fourth line or maybe even out of the lineup. He's not the play for either of the top two lines. I'm probably just going to roll, make my lineups like Monahan, Gaudreau, and Lindholm are going to be back together, and then Kachuk's going to be in on this second line, and they're going to go back on Mangiapane and Kachuk. And so that's going to downgrade Dallas 1 for me. I agree with you on Dallas 2. I like them as a full stack. It's not very correlated because they don't play. I mean, they're correlated in that they play at 5-on-5, but they don't play in the power play together. But you still get Pavelski. You can go Pavelski, Gurianov, and Tyler Seguin or Radulov or something like that if you wanted to get a 3-man Dallas stack or 4-man with Klingberg. So there's a lot of options to go, but I'm going to end up building a lot through, I like Seguin as a one-off. 6,400 is just a good price, even if it's not a great matchup. There's still some opportunities on the power play. I like Dallas 2 as a full stack, and then if Kachuk's in, so like when I crunch with Kachuk in, Calgary 2 is my highest exposed line. When I don't, they're still up there, but that's including $2,900 Reeder, who's I think he's projected as like an okay value. I'm fine basically having 0 of him, and you can't really swap up if you don't include Kachuk. It's just a way different price range. So I'm just going to build and risk it that Kachuk is in, somehow figures out a way to play here. And then,
I mean, worst comes to worst, you could swap down and maybe move up, like a Gustafson. I don't know if you can get all the way to Giordano, but you know what I mean? You might be able to.
I think you could do that. Gustafson, 4,300, Geo, 6,200, and then, the difference between Reeder and Kachuk is well over 2K. So, you're good there. If you want to include a Calgary defenseman in your Calgary stacks, that's probably a pretty smart option if you want to include Gustafson, Geo, someone. And I'm fine. Like, I don't really care about salary that much as long as I'm not leaving 15K on the table. I think I'm probably good.
I mean, if you're not playing Washington 1 tonight, you might have a hard time getting to 50K. Yeah.
So I don't go like, all right, I'm only going to use 49.5 because it's a 2-game slate. I'm fine using 50K if I can get a unique lineup. But I'm also fine using 43K if I'm fading Ovi in a few lineups and I'm going Calgary 2 plus Dallas 2 or something. Like, I don't think salary matters as much, and certainly not on showdown slates where you can get a fourth liner who scores 2 goals like Tyler Mott. Or I think he had a goal and an assist, but anyways, things can go crazy in these very short samples, short slates. So I'm stacking less, but still stacking. And I want a big piece of this Calgary 2 line. I think you're going to get Kachuk at like 10% ownership if he plays on a 2-game slate, which is outrageous. So if he does play, I would imagine he's easily my highest owned forward. I just think there's too much leverage on the field. And if he doesn't play, well, I'm going to have to swap a lot of lineups and could global swap to Lindholm as much as you can. You can but you can hand swap to like Radulov or someone like that, Jamie Benn, Pavelski. Not optimal. They're not going to be optimal lineups, but it is a 2-game slate. So just give yourself a chance that if Kachuk plays, that you've got some of him, because if you crunch the other way, you're going to be probably out of luck if he does end up in the lineup. What about Klingberg at 5,400? He's had a couple really nice games. I always talk about how I don't play him much with Dallas unless I'm playing Dallas stacks. But are you okay one-offing him on a 2-game slate?
Yeah, I mean, on a 2-game slate, I think our normal rules generally go out the window. I'd be fine with that. In general, I would still, if I had 50 Dallas 1 lineups, he'd probably be in like 30 of them or something like that. Yeah. Like most of my lineups would still have Dallas 1 plus Klingberg, but I'd be more open to Certainly more open to using him as a one-off. Um, the guys I wouldn't use as a one-off are Dallas's third pair. I was looking at their minutes. They're playing like 6 or 7 minutes a game.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for punt defensemen, I mean, Sekera and Verdun, at least they're in the lineup, but they're like they've honestly played under 10 minutes, I think 3 games in a row or something like that. So those aren't the punt defensemen you're looking for.
Yeah. Get someone else in your lineups. Like, you don't care about minutes that much when you're 2,500, but you can't be playing under 10 as a
I mean,
defenseman.
if you absolutely need a 2,500, those are the guys because at least they're in the lineup.
Give me
And I think
Derek
Sekera
Forbort.
actually hit the crossbar in the last game too. So, um, when you're at 2,500, they're in the lineup is probably the best you can do. But I would certainly not construct my lineup revolved around, using a punt defenseman that I liked.
I'd rather play Jensen Siegenthaler if he's in. Radko Gudas is 2,600. Forbort's 2,700 on the other side. But yeah, I mean, if you just need a unique lineup and you've cycled through all the other $2,500 guys, then sure. But it's pretty slim pickings here at the bottom. That about does it. Do we have anything else we need to discuss?
I mean, just the goaltending, I guess. I mean, like Cam Talbot, if Kachuk's out again, like Dallas has been starting to put up shots now that Calgary's defensive game has really started to fall apart. So, like Cam Talbot, assuming he starts again, would be firmly in my crosshairs as a goaltender to use tonight. 7,300 probably should see, maybe the most volume on the slate. So, he's a guy I like for tonight's 2-gamer.
Yeah, I think so I have Varlamov as my number 1 guy. I think Talbot's my number 2, just decent price. Probably going to see okay volume, especially if Kachuk's out, like you mentioned. So, yeah, goalie, I'm not too concerned about unless it's a bigger slate. So I just kind of play whoever fits, whoever makes my lineup a little bit different, and hope you run good on that position. You got to get the forwards right. You got to get the defensemen right anyways to bank and basically get really close to the optimal lineup on a 2-gamer, and you got to get the optimal on a showdown, even in small field. That's good. Talk some strategy, talk 2-game slate. Go over and play on Yahoo. They've got some contests for the 2-game slate tonight. They're also running some management fee free tournaments for MLB, $3.25. So if you're playing MLB, that's going to lock at 7:05 Eastern. Get in those tournaments, and I think it's a 50 max. Let's see, 25 max today for the 25 cents. So you can get in a bunch of lines that got CSV added. It's pretty easy to upload lineups on Yahoo. They're making it easier on you, and then you're going to want to build that bankroll for when NFL rolls around in 3 weeks from today. Other than that, player rankings, not projections, player rankings are free today for everyone. So if you want to try those out, just drop the link in the YouTube chat. And then feel free to use the Awesemo lineup builder. Get graded up on your lineups as you build them. We won't be having shows every day, but we'll probably sneak some in, especially when there's some good single game and showdown lineups. So we will see you guys hopefully pretty soon if the sites give us nice contests. And otherwise, you can find us in chat. You can still use ownership projections, rankings, top stack tool. We've got that for NHL as well. And see you guys soon. Good luck.
Good luck tonight, everyone.